Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving deep today into a really fascinating topic. These contemporary patio gardens. The ones that somehow blend this lush tropical beauty with really clean modern architecture.
Yeah, it's a great topic. And this deep dive is actually built entirely from a whole set of sources shared by one of you, our listeners. It's all about exploring how these outdoor spaces become these, well, integrated, really curated experiences.
Exactly. Forget just, a patio set and a grill somewhere.
Right. The sources paint a picture of outdoor spaces that are really true extensions of the home. They're described as rich with texture, just vibrant with greenery, and designed with incredible intention.
So our mission today is basically to unpack these sources together. We want to pull out the most important insights, maybe some surprising details, and really get a feel for what makes these spaces special.
Yeah, understand the thinking behind them.
We're going to discover how apparently every single inch is designed with purpose, how nature and architecture can actually harmonize, not just coexist.
Enter into a kind of dialogue.
Yeah, and how these spaces are crafted to really engage, well, all your senses.
Get ready to maybe look at your own outdoor possibilities through a completely different lens after this.
Okay, let's just jump right into this core idea then. It comes through straight away from the sources.
Yep.
A patio isn't fundamentally just an outdoor seating area anymore.
No.
It's presented as this complete, curated experience, an actual living space that just happens to be outside.
Precisely. That's one of the strongest principles the sources reveal. This real commitment to seeing the patio as an extension of your indoor environment.
Okay.
They describe these spaces as being incredibly rich in texture, absolutely packed with greenery, and styled with intentional beauty in every single element.
Yeah.
It's about creating a feeling of being enveloped by nature, but also surrounded by real design purpose.
And what's really interesting here, I think, is how this lush, almost sort of wild, tropical feel is designed to work with those really crisp, clean, modern architectural lines, concrete, glass, steel. You might think they'd clash.
Right. It seems counterintuitive, maybe. But the sources show how that sharp, clean architecture is deliberately softened and, well, complemented by nature's vibrance.
How so?
Well, they give this fantastic example of floor-to-ceiling wooden doors that just fold completely open, just dissolving the boundary between inside and out.
Oh, okay.
It's not a door you walk through in the traditional sense. It's more like a wall that just disappears, creating this totally seamless, fluid transition.
Okay, so imagine stepping through those dissolving doors then. What's the immediate visual impact? How do the sources describe that first moment?
You're immediately met with these really striking, almost sculptural compositions. The sources paint a vivid picture. You might see vertical gardens just alive with dramatic leaves like banana and monstera, the ones with those amazing natural splits.
Yeah, the big ones.
Exactly, with maybe ceramic pots brimming with the vibrant flowers of bird of paradise. And natural light filtering down, maybe through a pergola, catching the curves of carefully selected designer furniture. It's not chaotic, it's very composed, designed to grab your attention.
And this idea of intentional design, it's not just those big elements, right? It feels like it goes into everything.
That's a huge takeaway. The sources repeatedly emphasize that every square foot has a story to tell. There's no empty patch, no blank wall. The concept of just emptiness is actively designed out. It's replaced with thoughtful, often organic detail. Every single element feels like it's there for a reason, contributing to the overall atmosphere.
Let's talk about the furnishings then. It sounds like they're not just, typical outdoor chairs. They're more like integrated design elements.
Exactly. The furniture isn't an afterthought at all. They mention things like built-in concrete benches, often softened with really textured cushions,
Right.
and sleek loungers, maybe made from materials like bouclette, that lovely soft looped fabric you see indoors now,
Right, yeah.
or frames in brushed steel or muted bronze. The key thing is they feel like they belong. They blend seamlessly with the architectural materials around them.
And the plants themselves, I'm guessing they get the same kind of careful consideration, high intention?
Definitely. We read about plants being carefully grouped in ceramic pots, things like ferns, cordylines, elephant ears, rubber plants, chosen not just for how they look, but for how their leaves might catch and shimmer in the soft daylight.
Ah, nice detail.
Yeah. The space is described as living and breathing, constantly evolving as the sun moves and creates these dynamic shifts of light and shadow, maybe filtering through pergolas or tree canopies.
And it's not just one big open space either, is it? The sources talk about different functional zones and pathways within these gardens.
Yes, there's a very conscious division of space. Areas designed to serve different purposes. So you might say, step down onto a low platform made of warm wood decking. And that might be bordered by tiered garden beds planted with layers of greenery like alocasia, snake plants, maybe some trailing vines that soften the edges.
So pathways kind of guide you through these different zones.
Precisely. A path of maybe patterned ceramic tiles might lead you away from the main lounging area towards a more quiet, tranquil corner. And here, the sources describe something like a floating bench that's carved directly into a concrete wall, perhaps backed by a vertical garden, so thick and lush, it almost feels like an ancient jungle wall.
Wow.
It creates this wonderful sense of like discovery and journey as you move through the space. It's not all revealed at once.
And the walls themselves aren't just flat surfaces either. They're actually part of the design.
Absolutely. Activating the vertical space is a really core principle here. Walls become canvases for things like botanical sculptures, maybe metal wall hangings or textured panels. Even shelving that might be built into the architecture isn't just for, functional storage. It holds curated items like terracotta vases, maybe some outdoor books, woven lanterns, or minimalist sculptures. It all adds these layers of interest and story.
There's a specific example mentioned, a glass-walled courtyard. That sounds particularly striking.
It does, yeah. It's described as feeling both protected and somehow wild at the same time. Often centered around the sculptural water feature. Maybe something simple like a glass cube that just reflects the sky. And plants like colorful crotons and bromeliads in, say, hand-thrown pots are used to fill the layout, maybe with smaller companion plants tucked along pathways. A key detail the sources mention is that no surface is left untouched by this intentional design. Everything has a purpose.
And they even mention the air feels different in these spaces. Is that right?
Yes, which is fascinating. It's described as being somehow filtered through all the layers of leaves, maybe carrying the scent of damp soil or the soft rustle of palms. It really underscores how the whole sensory experience is paramount, not just the visual appeal.
Speaking of senses, texture comes up again and again in the sources as being absolutely crucial.
It's fundamental to this whole aesthetic. Concrete walls aren't just left bare. They're treated, maybe etched or sanded, polished, or sometimes clad in contrasting wood screens.
Okay.
Some might have ceramic tile insets providing these deliberate pops of color, like mustard yellow or rust or sapphire blue, while others might be left raw, specifically to allow vines to climb and take hold.
Wow.
And the planters themselves are treated as sculptural elements. They're varied in height, in foliage type. They never feel like just containers, they're active parts of the design composition. That interplay of textures is a huge part of the visual language.
How does light play into this beyond just, making things visible?
Even subtle daylight acts as a kind of designer here. Sunlight creates these dynamic shadows from things like pergolas and tree canopies, and they're constantly shifting throughout the day.
Right.
And it highlights textures, maybe the deep grain of a dark teak chair paired with that cream buccal upholstery we mentioned.
Yeah.
Or the speckled surface of a polished terrazzo coffee table, reflecting the greenery around it. Light isn't just functional. It's really used as a tool to reveal form and texture.
It sounds like they really make use of every single available bit of space.
That's another core principle. Space is never wasted. Even narrow corridors aren't just treated as pass-throughs, they're transformed into visual experiences, maybe with tall shelving or walls clad in interesting materials like geometric stone or sculptural panels. And seating gets integrated wherever it can fit. Perhaps a floating bench like we talked about, or a compact chair tucked into a nook, or even just a ceramic stool that can double as a small table. These aren't afterthoughts. They're deliberate points designed for pause and interaction.
And the connection back to the house itself, that transition, is treated with significance.
Absolutely. The transitions are treated almost like thresholds to nature. So when those big floor-to-ceiling wooden doors slide aside to reveal all this lush greenery, it's framed as a conscious decision to treat that moment as a seamless extension, an embrace of the garden, not just stepping out of the house into a separate zone.
They even use a side garden as an example, right? To show how these principles apply even in less prominent areas.
Yes, exactly. It shows this isn't just for large main patios. You could imagine, say, concrete steps that seem to float over white gravel, maybe with moss deliberately placed between them.
Nice touch.
Lined by these really bold ceramic pots, maybe in matte black or chalky sandstone, filled with striking tropical plants. There's a rhythm in the repetition of the pots, but variety in the size and the type of foliage.
Okay.
And maybe a small seating area there is framed by a simple wooden slat screen, perhaps holding tiny ceramic wall pots. It just highlights finding those design opportunities even in constrained or, transitional spaces.
And you mentioned overhead elements like pergolas earlier. They add another dimension, literally.
They absolutely do. Things like steel pergolas with trellises provide structure for trailing plants or maybe for hanging lanterns. They add drama, they add depth and atmosphere from above.
Right.
And the sources make it really clear that all the furnishings and elements beneath them are considered part of this overall design conversation. They're not just placed randomly under structure.
Going back to those cozy courtyards for a second, what makes them feel so complete and rich, even if they're simple shapes?
Even within a straightforward shape, the design is incredibly layered. So a polished stone floor might serve as the base. For a generous sectional sofa, maybe a low table topped with something textural like volcanic rock. The walls might feature vertical greenery, perhaps a minimalist canvas for art, and shelves holding lanterns and baskets. The plants themselves are used almost structurally, to guide the eye through the space.
So there's this constant design conversation, as you put it, happening between all the different materials and elements.
That's exactly the feeling the sources convey. Concrete dialogues with wood, steel supports the softness of greenery, fabric soften bolder architectural lines, even the tiniest corners are curated. That idea of emptiness is intentionally filled with thoughtful, organic details. It's about filling the space with meaning and experience, not just adding things.
This really pushes beyond just how it looks, doesn't it, into something much more immersive.
It absolutely does. The sources strongly emphasize the sensory experience. It's not just what you see, it's genuinely what you feel.
Like what?
Like touching the warmth of a ceramic pot that's been in the sun, or the roughness of a stucco wall, the velvety texture of a particular leaf. Hearing the rustling foliage, maybe the sound of a small water feature, the subtle chime of wind chimes, feeling the coolness of tile underfoot or the softness of a wooden deck or the warmth of stone. These are described as grounding micro sensations that really connect you to the space you're in.
And these different zones we talked about, lounging, pathways, nooks, they manage to maintain a sense of cohesion despite having distinct functions. How does that work?
Yes, they do. The cohesion seems to come from repeating key materials. Maybe you'll see a specific type of stone or wood used in different ways across the zone.
Okay.
And also through a balanced color palette. The dominant greens of the foliage are punctuated by these bold jewel tones, maybe in soft furnishings or pots, alongside warm neutrals and blacks that provide structure. It feels connected.
Garden walls also seem to be pretty multifunctional in this design approach, not just boundaries.
They go way beyond just being a boundary or a structure. They can actively support climbing plants, of course, but they can also be segmented into living panels with built-in planters.
Right.
Or have textured sandstone sections integrated with specific plants and maybe even abstract sculptures. Or, in some cases, they become complete vertical forests designed specifically to invite butterflies and bees. They're really active participants in the garden's ecosystem and its whole aesthetic.
It sounds like there's real artistry in how all these different layers, the built, the grown, the textures come together.
That's a core principle highlighted in the sources. This idea of rhythm being created between the built elements and the grown elements, between decor and utility, structure, and this kind of fluid flow. The design isn't meant to shout for attention, it sort of invites you in quietly and reveals itself over time.
So if you had to distill it, the essence of this style is
What?
immersion, intention, and artistry.
Precisely. That sums it up well. It's a place where concrete can hold warmth, steel feels somehow human and soft against nature, and tropical plants aren't just decoration, but really integrated elements finding their place among refined surfaces and furnishings.
Yeah.
And sunlight, as one source puts it, is kind of the final decorator, constantly shifting the mood and the character of the space.
This feels connected to a larger idea, maybe, of how we want our homes to feel like a holistic living environment.
It really is. These aren't just pictured as areas for occasional recreation. They're presented as intentional extensions of your personal ecosystem, designed to connect your senses, support your daily routines, and reflect your overall design ethos. They evolve with your lifestyle and mood, becoming really integral to daily life, not just an add-on.
The sources revisit that idea of rhythm and balance quite frequently, don't they?
They do. They talk about balancing anchored focal points, maybe that large sculptural planter or a water feature with the floating softness of, say, upholstery or cascading foliage. It creates this layered conversation between hard and soft surfaces, Light and shadow, color and material. It's dynamic.
And activating both the vertical plane and the horizontal plane seems crucial to establishing that rhythm.
It's definitely a hallmark of this approach. Ground features like geometric pavers or maybe beds of moss interact dynamically with overhead structures like beams or trellises covered in vines.
Right, connecting top and bottom.
Exactly. This intentional layering across different elevations draws the eye and creates depth in all directions. Even small changes in level can add drama and help define zones without needing solid walls.
They also seem to put a lot of thought into how the furniture is actually arranged within the space.
Oh, absolutely. It's far from just lining pieces up against a wall. The furniture described is often modular or curved or sculptural in its own right. And it's arranged very specifically to facilitate flow, maybe encourage conversation in one area, or create intimate spots for quiet retreat in another.
Okay.
And crucially, these seating areas are almost always framed by greenery in some way, creating this sense of a visual cocoon around you when you're sitting there.
This all just reinforces that idea that every single element, especially the plants and the textures, is chosen with incredible intention.
Exactly. Plants aren't just, bought randomly off the shelf. They're selected specifically for how their texture and their form will interact with the surrounding materials. Think of a glossy leaf against a matte concrete wall.
Yeah, the contrast.
Or an upright spiky plant next to a really flowy textile. Every single element is considered for its contribution to the whole composition. Nothing feels accidental.
And color, while it doesn't seem overwhelming, sounds like it has a powerful emotional impact when it is used deliberately.
It's all about controlled vibrancy, it seems. You might get these pops of deep sapphire blue in a cushion or an ochre-colored pod, or maybe some gold accents in hardware. These saturated tones stand out precisely because the dominant backdrop is this earthy green palette. It gives them space to make a statement.
Right.
It's not a riot of color, it's very intentional punctuation.
Textures really seem to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting and defining the whole aesthetic, don't they?
Absolutely. The contrast is key. That coarse stone against a smooth chair surface, or the dynamic reflection of planting in a glass panel. It's this deliberate contrast between the controlled, often refined architectural materials and the organic, sometimes wild textures of nature. These textures speak to each other, visually and tactilely. And as we discussed, those micro sensations they create the feel of them are what truly anchor you in this space.
You even mentioned the movement of air being considered a designed element. That's subtle.
Yes, it's subtle, but apparently essential to making the space feel alive. Strategic placement of foliage, or structures like screens or pergolas, can actually shape how breezes move through the patio.
Okay.
It helps create this feeling of living, breathing organism. You get the soft rustling of leaves, maybe the gentle swaying of fabric on cushions, and subtle shifts in temperature as you move through different zones.
How does lighting transform these spaces after the sun goes down? Is it just functional?
No, the sources describe the night lighting as very subtle and integrated, often built directly into the environment, maybe under benches, eliminating steps tucked into wall niches.
Okay.
The goal isn't to floodlight the whole space, but more to graze surfaces, illuminating textures and forms, casting gentle shadows that create depth and intimacy. The garden isn't just seen at night, it's sort of felt through this interplay of light and shadow on all those textures. It sounds very atmospheric.
And there's a conscious effort to blend interior design cues with the exterior ones.
This is where that seamless extension concept really comes into play. The sources talk about bringing high-end interior elements outdoors. Think tailored upholstery, layered textiles like throws or outdoor rugs, even curated accessories like marble-top side tables displaying objects, or outdoor-friendly books, linen cushions, woven baskets.
Right, things you'd expect inside.
Exactly. This adds layers of comfort and refinement that maintain continuity with the house. It makes the transition feel completely natural, like it's all one coherent space.
It really is about redefining those traditional boundaries between inside and out, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. Steel-framed glass screens might act more like lenses, offering filtered views rather than being solid, opaque walls. Living fences, created from dense planting, can provide privacy while still filtering light and air, wrapping you in nature, rather than just cutting you off from the world. These elements are described as framing your connection to the world outside, rather than simply creating barriers.
And the emotional resonance, how space makes you feel, seems to be the ultimate goal here.
That really comes through as the emotional truth of this design style. It's about creating spaces that resonate personally, that add meaning to your daily life, rather than just being about status or appearances.
Yeah.
Every square inch becomes, in a way, sacred, because it serves a purpose beyond mere function. It contributes to how the space makes you feel, how you experience it.
Designing these spaces sounds less like just decorating and more like almost an act of mindfulness.
It really does seem that way. It asks you to slow down, to really observe the light, the textures, the plants, and think deeply about what feels right in that specific space, what makes you exhale, what encourages you to linger. It's designed for a feeling, not just an image.
And in that sense, the patio garden becomes maybe the ultimate retreat.
Exactly. It's always there, constantly changing with the light and the seasons, but always welcoming. It's described as a place that supports daily rituals, fosters conversation, and gives you this dedicated spot to reconnect with yourself, with nature, with others.
There seems to be an artistry, too, in finding the balance between restraint and richness. It's not about filling the space with things, necessarily.
No, it's about filling it with the right things. It's about layering visual layers, tactile layers, spatial layers, layers of plants creating depth, layers of views through openings, layers of carefully chosen materials interacting. The result feels full and abundant, but somehow not cluttered or overwhelming. Rich, but considered.
If you found this video helpful or inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Interior Blockchain Studio for more expert design ideas, trends, and creative inspiration. Your support helps us bring you even more amazing content, so make sure to turn on notifications and stay updated with our latest uploads. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.